Taco Palenque fans, we have something special for you. Try the Casero Taco now for only $2.75 Monday through Thursday. Flavor packed with premium sirloin rice and refried beans. Only at Taco Palenque. At participating locations for limited time, not valid for delivery. Other restrictions may apply.
From a top secret network of highly secure locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider, brought to you by Taco Palenque. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by our panel of Express News Spurs beat writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn, with Express News sports editor Nick Talbot. There's not been a whole lot of change to the tone, the tenor, the theme of the season since the last time we saw you, so I will just start with Tom, who is on the latest road trip to the western regions of these United States. When is the losing going to stop, Tom? Is it going to get better before it gets worse?
Yeah, I like, I don't know when our podcast's coming out, but against Atlanta, I think they're going to win that game.
Wow. We're starting off with the prediction.
You're going full on Devin Vassell.
Yeah, just got that feeling that it's time. They're playing fairly well during certain stretches. Wemby was outstanding in Denver. That was a neat game, because it was neat, I say, in the sense that Wemby, the fans were really into it, watching him perform. The game was decided. They felt their team, the Nuggets, had the game in hand. So they just enjoyed the Wemby show. It was like going back to the preseason. And, he put on a really great all-around performance. What
was the final score of that game, Tom?
Well, are you saying in terms of it was another blowout? Or?
I'm just asking a question based on actual stats. Well, how badly did the Spurs lose that game?
Yeah, 12 points, I believe. Okay. And it was 28 at the start of it was 27 points when Pop pulled him early in the fourth quarter.
Okay, I'm just speaking for some of the listeners here.
I got you.
This is the Spurs Insider podcast, the podcast chronicling the every move, the every development related to one of the proudest franchises in the history of not just the NBA but professional sports. And that team has lost 12 games in a row, including the last one by 12 points, and we're just like, things might be getting better. I realize there's many factors, many layers at play here, but like things are not good. And this was the season in which the head coach of the team set the expectations, and we mention this every week, by saying this season was supposed to be about winning. Well, they're not winning. I'm not sure. Like the Wemby is mesmerizing and riveting, and like Tom says, every arena you go to, people are thoroughly entertained by it. I'm not sure that was what the goal was supposed to be this year, though. And I'm just sincerely, Jeff can take this next, but are things going to get better before they get worse?
Well, I've made the joke that scrolling through Twitter after a Spurs loss and just seeing the Wemby highlights, it reminds me of this scene from this cinematic masterpiece from our youth called Happy Gilmore, starring the great thespian Adam Sandler. And
by the way, the term youth is relative there. You weren't that young when that.
I was what, 19?
Well, I guess that's
as young as Wemby. Anyhow, it reminds me of the scene wherein Shooter McGavin, the villain of the piece, has won a golf tournament, and all the reporters are interviewing him, and then they want to ask him about, did you see the 400-yard drive that Happy Gilmore had on number 11? And Shooter's like, oh yeah, what did he come in dead last? Yeah, he had a good day though. That reminds me of scrolling the Wemby, the Spurs highlights after a game. You see all these Wemby plays. You say Wemby did something that's never been done since Tungsten Arm O'Doyle. And but the Spurs lost by 40 or 20 or 12 in a row, that sort of thing. So that's been kind of funny. One of the things, though, going back to your question, when is this thing going to end? One of the things that's kind of not been working in their favor is the schedule has been a little brutal. like we've sit around, or Spurs fans and some of the Spurs players over the last few years have been like, we need some national television games. Well, when you get them, this is what you get. They don't put you on national television to play the Detroit Pistons. You have to play good teams. And someone pointed this stat out to me the other day. They've played 15 consecutive games against an opponent that had a member of last year's All-Star team on it, which is a lot in a row. Like, there's no breaks there. That just shows you what kind of teams they're going up against. And that streak will actually break against the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks had no All-Stars last year. They do have two members of the 2022 All-Star team in Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. So it's not like they're talentless, but that streak does end.
I meant to look this up whenever you put this on the evil social media site that none of us should really be on, but we're on anyway, last night. Did the Memphis game qualify for that? Because the Memphis game is the one during in the middle of this whole streak that they clearly should have won. And
yeah,
it's another terrible team. Was Jaren Jackson on the All-Star team last year?
I believe that he was.
Okay.
And he's also the defending defensive player of the year, which doesn't fit into that streak.
And they were without like 19 of their top 20 players in that game, and the Spurs still lost it. So you can't blame everything.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But that's the one that should.
And also, it should be pointed out, I saw this come across the evil social media site last night that, and I was sort of blissfully unaware, like the Spurs are not on the longest losing streak in the league and are not the worst team in the league.
No.
Detroit's lost. Detroit has not won in November.
No.
Like 0 for 14.
They're going for no-win November.
Yeah. So it could get worse, I guess. The Wizards are pretty terrible. The Grizzlies are almost as bad as the Spurs were, but the Grizzlies beat your local Cagers during the streak. So I guess the thing is, again, it's not the worst it could possibly be. And those games against those types of teams are coming at some point.
But there's not many of them.
Good.
Like when you are the cupcake, there aren't that many cupcakes to play. You know what I mean?
Someone better circle January 10th against the Pistons. Just two teams that will probably still need wins.
The games coming up the first full week of December, I think you can put on your detective hat and figure out who these might be announced by the time the podcast comes out. But I think I've come to the deduction that the away game will be against either the Clippers or the Timberwolves. So Tom, you ought to get your travel app out now and book that trip. It's either LA or Minnesota, which, first week of December, what's really the difference between Minnesota and Los Angeles?
Not much.
One or the other. And so that away game is going to be brutal, even though the Clippers are kind of a mess. Like, the Clippers have handled the Spurs pretty well 3 games already this season. The home game, there could be some hope there. I think it's down to either Portland, Utah, or Sacramento. And this could be way off. I'm just kind of putting together which teams in the West there's still room for them to play, teams that aren't necessarily in the top of the in the quarterfinals of the in-season tournament yet. But I think those are the possibilities. So maybe that game against like a Portland or a Utah at home, if that's what it turns into, could provide some relief. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of cupcakes on the schedule after that. It's like at Houston, 2 games against the Lakers, at Milwaukee, game against the Pelicans.
When did they play the Suns again? That's what you need to know.
That's a good.
They own those dudes.
Yeah. The Wemby thing. There's 2 ways to look at that too. Like, it's historic, as Tom put it in his excellent coverage of this recent trip. Like, no one has done these specific things that Wemby has done before, but it's also like highly esoteric. Like, it's not a thing like, he had a quadruple double or whatever. It's just like he filled up the stat sheet in this way with these 5 stats that no one's ever done before. And I don't know. Are you, Jeff? As someone who wasn't there, are you astounded, impressed by some of these stat lines that have never been done before, or are they just kind of?
I don't know. 10 stocks for our 19-year-old rookies, pretty good.
10 what?
10 stocks.
Yeah.
Steals plus blocks.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
It's impressive. If Spurs fans turn off the game at halftime and don't see half of it, do they care?
That's a good point. Again, like this season is entertaining for the Wemby factor. It's just not what it was built to be, and I keep coming back to that. The listeners of this podcast, the fans of the local Cagers, expect some progress, and I don't think we're going to solve that during the course of this podcast, but I'm just wondering when that is going to come with some tangible results.
We've already heard they're going to beat Atlanta.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Tom started.
Here's my only prediction for that game against Atlanta. I don't think the head coach is going to have to get on the microphone and tell people to stop booing DeJounte Murray.
That's an excellent segue, Jeff.
Thank you. I think DeJounte, there was a little bit of like social media acrimony between social media Spurs fans and DeJounte after he left, but it wasn't like the citywide thing. So I think he will be soundly cheered, and Pop won't have to get on the mic to chastise everyone.
Your Spurs Insider, brought to you by Taco Palenque, hits your devices every Wednesday morning, which means that when Gregg Popovich did get on the microphone and chastised Spurs fans, cajoled them,
admonished
them. That's been a full week since that basically happened the night the last podcast came out. So this seems like ages and ages ago, but it has happened since the last podcast. So I guess I will, thanks to Jeff's great segue there, open it up to the floor as to just your 7 days in impressions, recollections, thoughts about that quite unusual, unprecedented incident.
Have you run into anybody in the real world or on social media that was like, Pop was right?
Absolutely not.
No, I have a few, yeah.
Really? I feel like that's been the one thing that has united Spurs fans of all stripes, race, creed, political affiliations. I mean, the universal reaction I heard was like, come on, man.
Yep.
So that was Wednesday. I walked into Thanksgiving with my family Thursday morning, and before anyone says hello to me or how's it going or pass the stuffing, my brother says, if I pay $40 to sit in the nosebleed, I'm gonna boo whoever I want to boo.
Yeah.
I think that was the prevailing sentiment among Spurs faithful.
I think the people that I've heard from that were pro don't poke the bear were people that are generally very nice and positive, and you guys may not have anyone like that in your lives, but if you
my brother is a Baptist preacher.
Okay.
He's a Baptist preacher, and he's still going to boo from the upper deck for $40.
What I found interesting, out in San Francisco, he had a really poor explanation after that game when we tried to find out what his motives were, what prompted him, and he went with the poke the bear comment.
Which contradicted his explanation.
Exactly.
Before, by the way.
Exactly. But in San Francisco, I asked him about it again, and he gave he stuck with his guns. He doubled down, but it was a detailed explanation.
It was detailed, but it didn't make a whole lot more sense.
Right. But what I'm getting at is both, and then Steve Kerr.
Go ahead.
Backed him up. He backed him up, of course, and he said, "Hey, a guy who helps you win a championship should never be booed." But what they're forgetting about, this was no Kevin Durant coming back to Golden State.
No,
being welcomed in open arms. This was a protracted, long, messy, ugly divorce. That a lot of people have hard feelings, and it's hard for them to get over it, and it's probably unfair to ask them to take those emotions and stuff them away and cheer for Kawhi. So
it's kind of like James Harden. Where's he getting cheered at this point? No one's going to cheer that guy. I mean, Kawhi is just not going to get cheered here. And if, I don't know, Gregg Popovich is probably never watched pro wrestling, but sadly, I watch a lot of pro wrestling, and if you tell a crowd not to boo, they're going to boo you into the ground. And that's kind of what happened. He should have came out there and told them to cheer. And then,
Well, he came up with a new defense. The defense is, don't poke the bear, and that'll keep the guy from scoring. It's a new defense that Pop came up with.
It doesn't. The explanation. It's not who we are. It don't poke the bear. None of that really holds up to any type of scrutiny, because if the whole attitude is don't poke the bear, then opponents should never make noise when the other team has the ball. Like the whole experience of going to games and home court advantage, home field advantage is about poking the bear. Like if that's the mentality that Pop wants, then every visiting team should be cheering for the opponent because they don't want to poke the bear. That doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
Yeah.
The not who we are thing doesn't hold up to scrutiny. When you look at the history, and Tom can back this up, he is lifelong San Antonio to the bone. Like that's what this franchise used to be known for, was the baseline bums and picking fights with Kareem and Larry Bird and Larry Brown throwing avocados at him when he said the only good thing about San Antonio is the guacamole salad. They pelted him with avocados and a guacamole when he came back.
Why didn't he mention the churros? I don't know.
Let's not go back to that. But there's the similar incidents that have been brought up where you have like Sam Weish, the old coach at with the Bengals, telling the fans not like that was like, let's not get a penalty here. Let's stop throwing crap on the field. That type of stuff. Yeah. It's not just booing an opposing player. And there's the thing, like Nick said, if you tell fans not to boo, then they're gonna boo anyway. If the coach was a little more popular, or if the opposing player was a little less, or I guess not as unpopular, maybe that would have a chance to work. But when you've lost 12 games in a row and a part of your fan base is predisposed not to enjoying what you're talking about anyway, talking about Gregg Popovich there, and the opposing player is as historically unpopular as Kawhi Leonard is, that had no chance of working. And I just think what one of you asked, Tom or Jeff asked, is anybody out there in the public kind of on Pop's side? What's really struck me about the past week is everybody in this podcast knows I'm a man of the people. I'm out there with the unwashed. I'm out there living my life in San Antonio, talking to all kinds of people. People love me. And
screaming down from your ivory tower.
Yeah. And everyone, the nicest people, the meanest people, the most far left to the most far right, have been kind of unified in thinking, what the heck was he thinking? That's what struck me, is people who love Gregg Popovich, love everything that he says, everything that he stands for, were kind of wondering, what was he thinking? And I'm not sure there's a good answer to that.
I wasn't, we're not down on the floor, so I don't know what he saw or heard, but I didn't see anybody throwing things. I didn't hear anybody yelling anything obscene or saying anything about, Kawhi's family or anything. So I don't know but if none of that, apart from any of that, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a good move. It was fans being fans, and they've done this. I mean, this isn't the first time. It wasn't out of the blue. It wasn't even that bad in my opinion.
We're talking about 5 years of booing Kawhi. At least, what is that, 7 home games that he's been back for?
Yeah, the first one with Toronto was worse. I mean, they were taunting his uncle and chanting his uncle's name and
chanting traitor.
Yes, far worse. Far worse.
The weirdest thing is the whole thing is when they quote when Kawhi was asked after the game about it. I think he seemed to handle the situation better than Gregg Popovich.
Oh, Kawhi didn't. That's the other part of it. Kawhi needs nobody to defend him. Like, he's doing fine. He's handling it fine. He's a grown man who's handling it fine. Kick the Spurs' butts. Like, that's how you silence a crowd that's booing you. You kick their butts, and that's what he did.
Yep. Well, it's something we've never seen before. Probably we'll never see again.
Look, even now, even we're all unified on it. Even all of us. It's the kumbaya moment of the podcast, I think.
I mentioned this.
this season's not so bad. We're seeing that Wemby's stat lines, we've never seen those before. Pop, admonishing the crowd. We've never, there's things to hang your hat on this season that are interesting and, never seen before.
I mentioned this in the newspaper, which you can still get subscription to. You can pick them up at your local convenience store. If you don't want to get the Dead Tree edition, you could subscribe to expressnews.com, get on the Spurs Nation newsletter, all that stuff. That I wondered if this was kind of a surprise to Pop, in that he realized that he doesn't necessarily have the power that he thought he did, that he might have once had when the Spurs were at their height. Like, do you think, Jeff and Tom, both of you who were around him a lot, do you think he was sort of surprised at the reaction? Like, I thought that whenever he'd grabbed the mic and followed it up with that, the two-arm waving away like a safe call, saying stop it. I thought he thought that he was going to get cheered and that people were going to stop, and instead the boos only got louder. Did you think he was sort of surprised by that?
Well, obviously you don't do that if you think it's going to cause the boos to get louder. So
right,
he probably was surprised by the reaction.
It was a gross miscalculation on his part.
I think so. I think so.
That might have been the grossest miscalculations he's ever made. I mean, that was just ridiculous, honestly.
He's still playing Jeremy Sohan at point guard, though. So
I was just going to say that makes me.
I'm sorry. That was. I'm just joking.
We were going to get through a whole podcast without that.
But that's where the fans are coming from. It's pointed out, couple it with what's going on the court. It's a really bad look.
Popovich has never been this unpopular before, and I don't even know if he's.
Whoa.
Okay, let's go back. Like, at least since he started winning championships, he's not been this unpopular. I mean, the very first season. I mean, obviously those are. I mean, that's a pretty unpopular season there, but.
Well, it was even before that.
Just like the championship season, whenever he nearly got fired in Houston, like he was one game away from getting.
When he canned Bob Hill, I mean that was when he was the most unpopular.
Yeah, some Spurs fans weren't even live back then.
True.
He's been coaching this team so long, so some people don't, even remember all that kind of nonsense that went on around that thing. But I mean, it's been a long time since he's been this unpopular. I mean, He used to have crown on his head. I mean, he was the king of the city, right? And it's not that way anymore. 3-14 isn't going to get there. Playing Jeremy Sohan at the point when it's not working isn't going to get there. And certainly telling fans not to boo is not going to get you there. I mean, that's just, the whole thing was absurd.
Who is the king of the city now?
Wemby.
Well, it's Mike Finger, and then it's Wemby.
I'm a benevolent king, though. Like, it's not like I'm up there in my castle, just judging my subjects. It's like the reason I'm so beloved is because everyone considers me one of them.
You're
beloved.
Beloved.
Who tells you you're beloved? Oh, you got home from Thanksgiving. That's it's just I'm putting it together now.
If Pop wants any advice on how to rule a city, I'm here.
Anyway, he'll bounce back.
Is there anything basketball wise that we need to get into? Like, it's almost doesn't matter because the team is losing by. It's not just the team is losing. It's again much like last year, the worst point differential in the league, right?
Yeah, and to spend so much time in the preseason, in training camp preseason, talking about the defense and needing to improve it. That's been a disaster, and it's pretty glaring.
Tom says it's a disaster. It's a disaster.
It's pretty glaring to be in the same state with the Rockets, who went from near the bottom to near the top with first-year Rockets coach Ime Udoka. So, that's something to look at too. That has not improved one bit.
I think it's just, I know people don't hate to hear it, but these things take time, like more than 15 games, like years of time. Like the Rockets were terrible, for years, and maybe the coaching change sparked them. I mean, probably it did. but it took them a while to grow into it. And like Oklahoma City, it took them a while to grow into it. I mean, Minnesota's the best team in the Western Conference. We're not that long away, far removed from them being a laughingstock. So it takes more than 16 games. It takes more than a season. It may take more than a couple seasons for this team to be like a team that looks like a butt kicker. And I guess maybe I get it, but I guess maybe a lot of people thought it was just as simple as get Wemby and going to be a lot better. I thought it'd be a little better. I mean, we all sat here in the preseason and said, the Vegas, or at least I did, the Vegas over-under, you take the over, and that's looking like a bad bet right now. So I guess they are disappointing in that way, but the thought that they were going to be like a playoff team was never in the cards. You'd like better than 3-14, and you'd like better than some of the 30-point whippings that they're taking. But then there are some nights where they actually look like a competent team for stretches of it. So I don't know.
Stretches, yes.
I think
I hate to come back to it, but the person who set the expectations was Gregg Popovich.
Yeah, all of
that's okay. Those should be the expectations a little bit. Winning, like trying to win, which I think they're doing. We discussed this on the last.
But he presented it in a way that was he contrasted it with previous years.
Right.
He said that the last few years have been about learning. This year's going to be about winning.
Yeah,
and maybe and I'm not sky is falling. It's never going to happen. Like 17 games into the season, all is lost. I still think there's a greater than let's say 5% chance that they hit the over on the 29.5. Like that seems insane, but and it's probably not going to happen. But you know how the NBA works. Teams can change on a dime, and all of a sudden you get hot and you win 6 out of 8 or whatever. Like that's maybe feasible again. That's possible. But as of now, like this season has not been about winning, and it's not really been particularly close.
I think maybe maybe a better way for him to have phrased that, and maybe it's just a subtle semantic thing, was this season. The next part of the development stage is learning how to win. This season is going to be about learning how to win, and sometimes it takes a lot of failure in those situations before you learn how to win.
That's a fair way to look at it, but I would posit that he is as surprised by the results. He is as close to being surprised. He's close to being as surprised by the results so far as he was by the reaction to him telling fans not to boo. Like he believed, if you would have told him that first day of training camp that they'd be 3-14, I think he would have been stunned. He expected to be better than that.
How much better than that? 8 wins.
8 wins is what, 8-9 out there. I don't know if he that much.
We're talking the difference of
6, but 3-14 is pretty bad.
Well, of course,
and 5 wins of 17. That's 30%. That's 30% of the games. That's huge. He didn't expect to be getting outscored by 12.9 points per night. Which true. Is, that's the other thing. And I get wrapped up into it too. We go into these post games, and every post game we hear about how, the team's learning. It's, proud of the way they fought. That, and there's probably some merit to that. Like, I'm not a coach. I'm sure there are positives to all these games. But this team is getting blown out like no other team in the league. Well, we talked about how bad the Pistons are. The Pistons are losing by 8.1 points per night.
Yeah, a lot of
them are losing by 12.9. That's 50% worse.
Yeah, a lot of it is
the games are not close.
Well, some of them are though.
Not really.
When you lose 2 by 40 of the, they've got a lot of they've got a handful of fourth quarter games.
That 12-point loss to Denver the other night was the average result of the season. It was a blowout.
Well, it was a blowout. That was a blowout. But I mean, I don't have them in front of me. But I've sat in that room at the end of the game and watched, left my seat going, they have a chance to pull this out. And by the time I get down to the press room, it's like, now they're down by 8 again.
Golden State was a good game down the stretch.
Like they've had several of those. Not defending it, but like when you lose 2 games 2 games by 2, when you lose 3 of your first 11 games by 30 or more and 2 of them by 40, and you're still at game 17 or whatever, that's going to skew your average. It's like turning in twos, not getting 2 zeros in your algebra class. You're not going to be able to make that up very easily, even though you have some games that are 7, 5, 9. Like
during this 11 game losing streak. Do you want to know how many games were decided by fewer than 5 points?
Yeah, well, yeah, but a lot of them are within 0. But how many?
0.
But how many of those were clutch time games where it was within 5 points in the last 5 minutes? They just end up getting blown, stretched out at the end. Like they're not just coming out every game and it's 30 points in the first half and never gets better.
That's fair. That's fair. But their closest loss this year has been by 5 points, and there have been some close clutch time games. But the point is, like they're not just losing by a fluke basket here and there.
Well, of course.
Anyway, where do you want to go from here?
To practice.
I guess we've pretty much summed it up. I don't know. Is there any positive note to end this week on? Tom,
that's your job.
They had
that's why you're the king of San Antonio.
Wemby's name was spelled correctly.
El Rey Feo, the king of San Antonio.
All right, hold on. I'm going to go. I just looked it up.
Uh-huh.
Your San Antonio Spurs have played 10 crunch time games this year.
Uh-huh.
That is tied for third most in the league.
Okay.
So
because they're always behind in them, first of all. A lot of teams don't play that many because they're winning some games by 5-6 points at the end.
But my point is, they've had 10 of those games are fourth quarter games.
Fourth quarter games, boy, the standard.
That's exactly what clutch. That's exactly what it means. That's
I'm
exactly
just saying. I know what it means. I'm just saying the standard we're setting here is not very high.
Hey, we gotta look for something positive.
I guess so. You're right. So here we go. That's it. If you buy a ticket to a Spurs game, there's some positives. There's a good chance, as Jeff just pointed out, using statistics, information, knowledge, that the Spurs play more clutch crunch time games than all but 2 other teams in the league.
Well, I said tied for third. So
tied for third. Well, that's all but 2 other teams in the league, right?
They're tied with a bunch of teams for that.
Well, there you go. They play a lot of crunch time games, which means you're going to get your money's worth. If you go to a Spurs game, if you tune into a Spurs game on the TV, you're probably going to be able to see a game that's going to go down to the last 5 minutes where there's at least going to be a chance. That's something positive. If you go to a Spurs game, there's a good chance you might have some interaction with the coach. Like the coach might talk to you personally. Like that could be a good thing. You don't get that in every arena in the league. A lot of them bring this in the league. You go to the game and the coach never talks to you at all.
Never.
So if you go to the game at the Frost, like the coach might talk to you. That's a good thing. That might be worth your investment in ticket there. You could go down to the wire. You're going to see some games in the fourth quarter that matter. The home team might miss the shots and not finish it off, but hey, there'll be excitement. Those are the positive things. So keep showing up. Maybe things will change in the end. Until next time, take care of each other and keep it real.